Northern England, God's own country, rolling hills, fantastic coasts, great music, cartoon eggs hung by a noose, the home of the northern male, the working class man, the backbone of Britain. Andy Capp is not a good example of this type of male. Andy Capp is a belligerent, feckless layabout, fighting with the police, his wife, and dividing his time between trying to cop off with young ladies at the local pub and sleeping off his gyro-gained hangover on his own settee. What an interesting game protagonist this makes. So kids, do you want to be Spider-Man, Kratos, Master Chief, or Andy Capp? It's up to you. Aspire to be what you want. A Daily Mirror comic strip, Andy Capp's slovenly misadventures started in 1957, written by Reg Smythe. They follow the day-to-day low-energy exploits of Andy as he trots around Hartlepool fleecing money for booze and trying to avoid the long arm of the law and the even longer rolling pin of his long-suffering wife, Flo. Despite his less than desirable lifestyle and poor attitude, numerous companies have used him in advertisements, including Kit Kat and the post office. Andy even has his own branded corn snack, which has been manufactured since 1971. And if you're wondering why you haven't seen it, well, it's only available in the United States, which is why you haven't seen it in your local Tesco. Goodmark Foods licensed the character way back when, and the product has survived 5 decades and company takeovers. Andy's comic strips are published in the United States too, along with Australia, and although he's not on the same level as Garfield or Peanuts, he is a known quantity. His fame is such that there's even a statue of him in Hartlepool. He's really not done too bad, has he, for being a lazy slob? But why is Andy in this series? Well, there was a television adaptation launched at a similar time to its computer game counterpart. 1988's Andy Capp was made by Thames Television for ITV. It was a sitcom shot entirely on location without an audience, which at the time was an unusual step. The lead roles of Andy and Flo were taken by Likely Lads star James Bolam and Paula Tilbrook, most famous for her 21-year stint as Betty Eggleton in Emmerdale. Unfortunately, the show was not a success, lasting just one series after low viewership. The computer game was published by, funnily enough, Mirrorsoft, the software arm of Robert Maxwell's media empire. It was released in Europe and North America on the Commodore 64, and just Europe for the Amstrad and the Spectrum, because no one owns an Amstrad or a Spectrum in America or Canada, so there'd be no point. It'd be like selling extension leads on the moon, or sexy Halloween costumes in Afghanistan in 2021. There'd be no point. It was released as Mirrorsoft's big Christmas blockbuster title for 1987 because every kid was clamouring to be an unemployable wife-beater in the late 80s. That's how subjugated we were in the 80s. It was white dog shit and this. The game saw a budget re-release by Alternative Software 2 a couple of years afterwards. The game's story is that Andy is in a spot of bother. He's lost his gyro, his rent book, has less than a tenner in his pocket, and wife Flo wants some money. So Andy has to hit the streets of Hartlepool in an effort to get his life back on track and his bum back on that sofa. The strip's key characters, from Andy's younger extramarital girlfriend to wife Flo to neighbour Chalky, are all present, with the rent collector and the constabulary forever in pursuit of Andrew should he make a nuisance of himself. The icons at the bottom of the screen represent the actions Andy can do. The wallet enables Andy to pay for beer, the rent, and of course the Daily Mirror. It's got to be product placement, it's got to be the Daily Mirror. Speak lets him ask the populace of Hartlepool questions about his missing personal effects and ways to get more money. Rather oddly, he has to blow them a kiss to get them to speak, which makes sense in terms of his wife and his side hoe, but it makes less sense when he's approaching a copper. Is this a northern thing? They are friendly, but this seems a little bit overly familiar. fight is self-explanatory, and yes, marital abuse makes its Spectrum debut before Alternative's Punch and Judy came out the following year. Then there's the action button, which covers all your inventory and object interaction needs. Thanks, action button, you're doing a bloody good job. These are all accessible by hitting the fire button. Please take notes on this Pink Panther game. Andy Capp is not without its control issues, however. It can be a right swine, lining up the northeast's most publicised slob with doorways and the crosstown pavements that you need to traverse through his borough with, but due to the game's highly generous time limit, it's only mildly frustrating, really. The game world itself isn't easy to follow, arranged as it is in identical looking blocks, so make sure you have access to a game map from one of your favourite gaming periodicals. You can visit the pub, which tops up your alcohol meter. This obviously represents your dwindling health bar. You can go to the court for your indiscretions, where you'll have to pay a fine, which hits poor old Andy in his pocket. You can rob Flo's handbag, why not? And you can turn up for a job, ask for your pay before you start, then never turn up again, and do all sorts of nefarious things to continue your lacklustre life. It nails the nefarious ne'er-do-wellery of young Andrew Capp. And doesn't it look the part? The simple white and black comic strip looks are uncluttered and uncomplicated, animating smoothly, and they perfectly replicate the look of the source material. It was also used by The Edge for their Spectrum game of Snoopy in 1990, to great effect. Sound is less effective. The grating beep of Andy's slow-paced shuffling will eat its way into your soul by the game's end. There's not a lot to the game, in all honesty, and I doubt you'll want to return to it once his seeking of his job seekers is at its drubbings. It's competent, glacially slow, and while fantastic in its interpretation of the character and its general presentation, it's not going to lodge itself into your Spectrum tape deck like Andy on the sofa after an all-nighter. Crash magazine had this to say on Andy Capp in issue 49. Andy Capp stays in keeping with the light-hearted newspaper cartoon, and it's sure to be a hit with fans of the strip. They awarded it a 73%. The 71st issue of Sinclair User gave it a 7 out of 10 and said, "It looks very good, it's technically clever, but I don't think the gameplay is going to retain your long-term interests." Andy Capp was given an 8 out of 10 in your Sinclair issue 27, and they had this to say in summarisation: "Clever and original arcade adventure that accurately simulates the breathless non-stop adventure of Andy's life. Champion." CMVG's issue 76 gave it a 9 out of 10, and their hit award, they said that they quite enjoyed playing the game. Perhaps it was the slob in them coming out. Perhaps it was. And so there we go. A game about a drunk wife beater isn't bad. Amazing. From stealing the missus's handbag this episode to picnic baskets the next, as we head back to Jellystone Park to see our good friend Yogi Bear again. Until then, Kay, thanks, bye.